Welcome to the Iron Prescription podcast with your hosts, Doctors Lynette and Stuart. We're both GPs and we're both personal trainers, though we do both jobs in very different ways. We chat about the best things you can do for your health and fitness, and along the way, help you to avoid wasting time on the things that really aren't. Thanks for listening. Okay, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Good week skiing?
Yeah, fantastic. Snow is absolutely brilliant and it's dumping significantly this weekend as well. I'm back out again in 4 weeks' time, so looking forward to that.
Oh, are you? I've never been, and I don't think I ever will now, to be honest.
No. You definitely should go. Definitely.
Really?
Yeah.
People have been saying that to me for years, and then I just haven't really got the urge to buy all the gear, get cold. It just doesn't seem very appealing now that I'm, late 40s.
I think cold is a myth because you're like, I'm never cold. I'm like sweating. It's a proper workout. So I don't think actually cold is a thing if you've got the right gear. And it's just incredibly great. If you do it properly, it's just incredibly great. Get outside, do some exercise without knowing you're doing exercise.
Well, I don't know. Well, yeah, I'll push that back to another time. So we were going to talk about size. Yeah.
Does size really matter?
Yeah. Yes, I would say is the answer. Move on.
So no, I would say it doesn't. Move on.
Okay, so size in relation to health and fitness and muscle size in particular, I'm guessing is where we're going to narrow down on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, there's this myth when people start going to the gym. In fact, I hear a lot, I hear a lot from clients who go, no, I don't want to do any weights because I don't want to get big. I don't want to be a bodybuilder. I don't want to be, I don't want to be ripped and put all this weight on and everything. And actually, that's just not true at all. And I think what would be really interesting here is to talk about strength, hypertrophy or muscle size, and how actually they aren't the same thing. And you can be very lean and not muscular, but be incredibly strong. And understanding that is very important on that road to being healthy and being healthy for the right reasons. And understanding that actually hypertrophy may not actually be either strong or healthy.
I agree. I think probably a good thing to draw attention to that most people would be able to think about would be Olympic weightlifters.
Yeah.
There are some incredibly strong, and I often get people to think about the women in particular. There is a weight category that I think is 48 kilos, which is nothing. If you work in old money, I think that's probably about 7.5, 8 stone. And you will see those Olympic weightlifters holding 100 kilo over and above their head, and they are not big women.
So they're double their own weight above their head.
Yeah.
Wow.
So something else is going on there that enables you to adapt and train for strength without necessarily increasing size. And I think most people probably don't know anybody in the bodybuilding community, but when you listen to them, they will often admit that the biggest bodybuilders are by no means the strongest.
Correct.
They are training their bodies to look a particular way by a different training adaptation. Yeah. So strength and size do not necessarily go hand in hand.
And if you look at people who are in the strongest person competitions, strongest woman or strongest man competitions, strength competitions, so not Olympic lifters, but people that are lifting rocks, pulling cars, pulling planes, these people have a completely different physique that you would, when you look at them, you may say, wow, they're a huge mass, but actually they look like they're carrying a significant amount of excess weight there. They don't look particularly healthy. So I think we need to break down what actually is going on and for the listeners, for them to understand what's going on and how you can adapt your training regime to achieve all of those, depending on what you do and why that happens. The neuro pathways, I think, is incredibly interesting because people don't actually think about those when they start training. When you talk about, well, we're going to talk about training your nerve impulses. They go, well, no, I'm not here. I'm here to train my muscles. You know, I lift a weight, my muscles get. That's how it works, and that's not how it works at all. And the way I normally describe it is, if you saw somebody who was sadly been in a car accident, for example, and was been paralysed from the waist down, how would you expect their legs to look? If you could physically look at their legs, what would you expect to see? And of course, the reality is they have very, very muscle density at all. And even if they have physio and they're moving those legs, they still don't have any muscle bulk. So what's happened, and we know what's happened, is the spinal cord has been severed and there is no impulse going to the leg or legs. And the other end of the scale is actually when you start training, the first thing that wakes up, the first thing that's stimulated is not the muscle, but the nerve. And the nerve going, oh, hello, what's this all about? And getting that impulse to the muscle.
I'm also just remembering the amount of times I've been out to see people at home on a home visit, and they've maybe not been very well, maybe they're still not very well, and they probably haven't, well, they will have lost some muscle mass in the time that they've maybe had a couple of weeks in bed. Say it's a really bad chest infection, a pneumonia, something like that. And then they go to get out of bed and they can't muster up the strength
Yes.
in order to initiate that muscle contraction that they need to be able to get out of bed.
Yeah.
And that will be disproportionate to the amount of muscle mass that they've lost. You know, you don't peel the covers back and see these two little withered legs over the space of a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But the ability to initiate that movement, and people should take notice of this, because this is what can happen to any of us in a short amount of time if we find ourselves unable to get out of bed or recovering from surgery. It's a combination of both, but it's that drive from the central nervous system to coordinate these muscle systems to get working together in order to get you moving and produce the force needed to get you moving.
And also not just the force, but the speed. And one of the main reasons that people in later life go on to have fractured hips and serious falls is not just because their bone density is less, etc., but it's the fact that when they trip, their central nervous system isn't quick enough to react to the muscles to get them to move fast enough for them to stumble. They just fall. So if you've got a very good central nervous system that's really, really switched on and is reacting incredibly quick, then you have that ability to catch your fall before you actually fall. And you see this in fell runners. So their central nervous system is incredibly hot wired, and they're running downhill. And it's if you and I ran down the side of Snowdon, it's not going to last very long, I'm sure.
No, definitely not with me.
before we're flat on our faces, and it's that central nervous system that's keeping them going, and that speed of reaction that's allowing those muscles to work. So my point here is that actually you can therefore have incredibly fit muscles without having a huge muscle. So you don't have to be huge to lift a heavy weight or move quickly. In fact, being huge is probably going to restrict that ability to lift bigger weights and also to move quickly. And bodybuilders are a point in case, and they will openly admit that, as you've just said. Don't get me wrong, a heavyweight bodybuilder is incredibly strong compared to a normal person in the street. But when you put them against an Olympic weightlifter, there's no comparison. Their ability to move that weight is no comparison. But what they've done is they've created hypertrophy. So hypertrophy is the medical term for increasing in size. And they've done that by repetitive loading of the muscle to failure to increase size. So they're not increasing strength. The impulse they're sending to the muscle is, you will get bigger because I'm making you fail. So it's getting to the point of fatigue, and the muscle they're doing big weights, short reps, but they're doing enough reps to fail, where that stimulus says to the muscle, you've got to get bigger. The fibers have to recruit more intracellular contents, etc., for them to get that hypertrophy.
Yeah, I often explain it to people as what you're asking the body to do is different. So if you're using higher reps with a slightly lower weight than is maximum strength, you're creating lots of damage at the muscular level to force the body to repair and build back those fibers in a bigger size to protect it against next time.
Yeah.
But if we're working basically on a strength program, and if you're avoiding doing a strength program because you're a cyclist and you don't want to be heavier on the bike particularly, or you're a woman wanting to lose some weight and you're worried that strength training is going to prevent your weight loss or increase in your size, and it's a misunderstanding of what's going on with the training adaptation that we're seeking to gain. So you can absolutely train strength, not gain size, and become faster on your bike because you're going to have more power output with each stroke of the bike without necessarily adding a huge amount of weight. And the same if you need to develop strength because you're a woman in the second stage of life and your strength is dropping off a cliff and you're feeling a bit less stable. You can absolutely train that strength while still focusing on reducing some body fat and get the outcome that you're hoping for. It's about having the right design program for the goal that you're trying to set out to achieve.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting point what you just made there, because there's this debate about, people say, I said, what do you want to achieve? And they go, well, invariably, and I'm not being gender specific here or anything, but men go, I want to be bigger. Ladies go, I want to be smaller. Men want to put on muscle, and ladies want to lose fat, or they want to change the way their body appearance is. Both want to do it, but they want to do it different ways. What you can do is you can definitely increase strength, increase power, and lose weight.
Fat.
Yes. What you can't do is increase muscle size, get hypertrophy, and at the same time be reducing fat, because you're going to have to be in a calorie surplus to get hypertrophy. So to get the muscles bigger, we've got to shovel something in as well as the stimulation on the muscle. And that's, again, I'll get my son's a classic. My son is ultra fit, probably one of the fittest people I know.
How old is he?
He's 22.
Say no more.
22. He's a boxer, a high rocks athlete. He did a marathon recently with zero training, did the Snowdonian marathon, 4 hours. The first marathon he'd ever done. The furthest he'd ever run before that was 13 miles.
Make sure he appreciates how easy this is at 22.
I know. I mean, if he wasn't my son, I'd hate him. In fact, I do hate him anyway. But he also says, I want to be bigger, Dad, because he's incredibly lean. And I'm like, well, you're going to have to eat more. And, he will spend hours in the gym, and his strength, his power to weight ratio is unbelievable. But he won't accept the fact that he's going to need to eat several thousand calories a day, and not just any calories. Calories are calories, but particularly high protein. To achieve that. And that's what, if you want that hypertrophy, you're going to have to accept the fact that you're not going to initially lose fat. And that's when you look at bodybuilders, what they do is, if they're in the off season, they look a little bit chubby. They want that. I'll come back to that reason in a minute. But they want that chubbiness, but it's only when they start cutting for their competition that you really see that definition coming out, and that perfect physique that they are striving for towards competition. But proteins, so the protein is the base of any muscle growth. So you need to be having at least, I consider, 2 grams per kilo in your daily amount of food of protein to start looking at hypertrophy. And
So for anybody that wants to make sense of that, take your weight in kilos,
yeah,
double it,
yeah,
and that's how many grams of protein you want to be getting in across the day. And most people don't have a reference, unless they're already tracking food,
yeah,
they haven't a clue how many grams of protein
no,
that they're eating. So I tend to get new clients just to measure it before they change anything.
yeah,
It's extremely rare for anyone, and I work with women mostly, but it's very rare for somebody to naturally eat more than about 80 grams of protein. So you're more or less looking to double it. And I always say aim to double it, because you'll
yeah.
still fall short, because you will be looking at it and going, oh my God, how am I going to get all of this in?
The other thing about protein is not how am I going to get it in when you look at the volume, but it makes you feel incredibly full.
Mm,
So it turns off that hormone that's saying feed me, unlike
mm,
carbs,
mm,
which you start taking 2 grams of carbs per kilo, you'll just want more and more and more. And it's that because you get that huge swing in your insulin and the
mm,
body's craving that, and you're getting more hungry the more you eat. Whereas
mm,
protein, and that's why bodybuilders who are way in excess of that, they're not eating 3 times a day. They're having to eat 6 times a day
mm.
to shovel that amount of protein to get it on board.
Yeah, because it's quite boring. In times when I've used a high protein diet, I
Yeah,
mean, you can think of a nice juicy steak and think, I'll never get bored of that. Trust me, you
yeah,
do get bored of it
yeah,
quite quickly.
yeah,
And it goes, I don't want to sway off too much into diet territory, but we don't have that same switch that kicks in with carbs. We are not wired that way. But with protein, if you ate a portion of steak that filled 2/3 of your plate, you would be bored chewing
yeah,
before you get to the end of it, and you won't have much room for anything else. So
yeah.
it's quite a shift for a lot of people in terms of we're quite conditioned to what we see on our plate, and when you start to play about with that sense of what's normal, it takes quite a bit of time to get used to it, and a lot of people will struggle initially.
Yeah, it is boring, and bodybuilders will tell you how boring it is. And the commitment to be a competition bodybuilder is unbelievable because they're just eating, chicken steak after chicken steak after.
Mm,
It's just rice and chicken, rice and chicken,
mm,
just constantly eat. And I mean that 6 times a day. But you've got to see it as part of the journey to what you want to achieve, and
mm,
stop seeing food as I think we are conditioned to see food as a social activity and an enjoyment activity. We're eating food for the enjoyment of the food, not necessarily what the food is doing for us. And of course, you can do that, and you can absolutely do that. But you really should remember what food is there for. Food is there to deliver life to your body and make it function.
mm.
And all of those micronutrients and macronutrients are what deliver your ability to live and your ability to live a long and happy and healthy life.
I think it's worth saying as well, even if you're not eating to gain size, if you are deliberately on a training program and looking to improve your health, what you eat absolutely matters. And I would still say for those people, prioritizing protein for recovery, for
Yep.
repair. If you've not been well, or if you're having a routine operation, the needs of the body for good quality protein in just recovery from anything are massively increased.
Yeah.
And the problem is, you don't feel like it. You feel like having a cup of tea and a piece of toast
Yeah.
because you're not very well. But the data is really quite staggering on this. And there are some ways I've started to say to people, even if you don't feel like eating, have a protein shake. If you know you're having a surgery's planned in the future, planning this as part of your recovery nutrition plan is it's not off the wall, it's not extravagant, it's definitely not niche, but we don't necessarily give people that education and that opportunity to help themselves. And most people can face drinking something that's lightly milkshake flavored, as
Yeah.
opposed to, chicken and broccoli when you've had surgery and you feel a bit shitty. So we don't absorb it as well as we get older. So if anything, we should be putting more of it in our diet as we get older,
Yeah.
just for basic repair and replenishment of the overturning of tissues that we do naturally anyway.
I hear a lot of people as well say, oh, high protein diets, that puts you into kidney failure. So just to set the record absolutely straight, that is, as long as you've got healthy kidneys and you haven't been told that you have renal disease, you are not going to elicit renal disease by having that amount of protein in your diet at all. It's going to be good for you. There is this myth that you're going to really damage your kidneys by having a high protein diet, but it actually that is exactly what it is. It's a myth, and we're not talking about ultra high protein diets. We're talking about normal high, rather than ultra something crazy. The other thing that's really important, I think, to say is there are two other things that I think you can do to really help that process of recovery and growth and strength, and that's using basal chain amino acids, which are the building blocks of the molecules and the cells within the muscles. And you can get those either in capsule form, like a multivitamin, or a lot of protein powders have got them added, or drinks have got them added. And the other one is creatine. And the data on creatine, it goes back centuries now for when it was first discovered. And you can have it as a drink, as a capsule, but that substance really does help to supply the muscles with the fluids, for want of a better word, the fluids that they need to get the nutrients into the muscle. So it's retaining fluid, and it's retaining that by increasing the size of the muscle fibers, by swelling them and increasing the recovery of the muscle, and therefore the growth of the muscle as well at the same time.
Yeah, I think there's been some really interesting content that I've picked up on to do with creatine. And creatine, if you say it to anybody who's been in the gym space, they will again think that it's their little supplement that they know about and they can take advantage of. What I'm noticing now is it's becoming much more generalized.
Yeah.
In that any athlete should take it to help with their recovery. There's virtually no side effects, unless some people get a little bit of stomach and reflux from it. And I recently heard there's a micronized form of it that you can get that virtually eliminates that. Apparently, I haven't needed it. There's some new research that's showing cognitive benefits, that it can help, basically help your brain function better. And most of us women who are starting to notice at a certain time of life that brain is getting a little bit foggy could do with a little helping hand. It's cheap. It's not wacky. Actually, most people would benefit from sticking a spoon of it into a protein shake, or even just mixing it in a bit of water and necking it, 5 grams teaspoonful a day.
Yeah.
There really aren't any downsides. It's just
No.
remembering to
Yeah.
take it, I think, more than anything.
Like with all drugs, it's all on the packet, so I won't go into the details, but there is a loading regime. So when you start it, you should load up. And then when you've got this stability of the load, then you carry on with that regular supplements. And like you say, there is almost no side effects to it, but there are incredible benefits for it. It's definitely not an illegal supplement or anything. You can't be tested for it. No athletes at the Olympics are being tested for it and banned, etc. It is a naturally occurring substance that aids the body. And then finally, the other supplement that I recommend for people using is caffeine, because caffeine, for either pre-workout or post-workout, works in two different ways. Caffeine is a natural analgesic and stimulant, and will allow you to train harder in the gym. But because of those two reasons as well, it's also incredibly good for recovery.
I would just add, if any of my current clients who train in the evening are listening to this, you are not included in that, because you need the sleep more than you need the caffeine.
Although I did read an interesting paper the other day, because the way caffeine works is it blocks adenosine, but it doesn't suppress the secretion of adenosine. And so adenosine is the hormone in the body that keeps everything calm and everything chilled. In fact, in medicine, when somebody's heart's going too fast, we give them adenosine to slow their heart rate down. If they've got something where the heart is going unnaturally too fast. And when you give adenosine, I don't know if you remember the first time you ever gave adenosine, and you give it through the syringe and you look at the monitor and you think, oh my God, I've killed
Oh, yeah.
because everything stops and then it wears off and it starts again. But that's what caffeine does. It turns off adenosine. It blocks adenosine, but adenosine doesn't go away. You're still secreting adenosine. And this is why people get this fluctuating. If they're taking too much caffeine or if they're taking it at the wrong time of the day, they get this seesaw effect. And actually, this paper that I read was saying that you could use caffeine for insomnia.
What? Hang on. I'd need to see that paper because
I will send it to you. And it was really compelling, actually, when you read it, because what it was saying was, if you took the caffeine at the right time, what you're going to do is you are going to suppress adenosine latching onto the receptors. And then you're going to get this huge wave of adenosine as the caffeine wears off, and boom. And if you combine that with your natural secretion of melatonin, good night.
Okay, that would be. I wouldn't dabble with that. I can't drink caffeine after about midday. But sleep for me is a tightrope that is very, very tightly wound and has to be carefully looked after and protected. But there are people. My dad is adamant he can have a coffee at night and sleep absolutely fine. The sleep expert, Professor Matthew Walker, makes the case in his book Why We Sleep that the sleep studies clearly show that even people who think they aren't having their sleep negatively affected by caffeine, it's wrong. The data shows you're not getting into that deep wave sleep. So I don't know. I've got a friend who's very interested in sleep and has a whole sleep business. Maybe one day we'll call him on and
absolutely
get his views about that. But
and of course that's the last thing we should say about when we talk about hypertrophy and strength. None of this would happen if you do all of those things that we've just talked about, all of those perfectly. But if you don't sleep, none of that is going to matter, because when we're sleeping, all the magic is happening. So all the work that's going in with the protein and the going to the gym and the stimulation of the muscles and everything that's happening, no magic is happening there. Nothing's happening. And as soon as you go, that's when the magic is happening at the cell.
Yeah. And so zooming back out on all of this, I think if you're not training, then why the hell not? You need to get on and you need to start. But I tend to approach any new person, any new client with strength first. And that's not because I'm against training for size, and I include women in that as well, because in particular with women, if you've been on a weight loss journey and you've lost a lot of fat, then you may not be happy with your shape. And one of the things you can do then is manipulate your training in order to develop muscle hypertrophy in certain areas of your body. I was talking to a patient recently who's had some success with one of the weight loss injections, but she was hitting that stage where she said, I'm now losing weight from my legs and my bum, and it's not going off my middle. And so yes, you might start off wanting some fat loss, but you then will perhaps have other things that come out as you move through that journey. So I'm not against training for hypertrophy. I think it has a place in men and with women. But if you're not strong, you are not a particularly useful human being.
No.
And can you be too strong? I'm not convinced that you can for the majority of people. I think more strength is generally better as long as you're not tipping over into injuries. And so starting with that as your baseline, I think, should be the priority for everybody, whatever your sport, even if you're not a sporty person and you are just training to stay in the game, to be a functional human and be the best that you can. Because one day you will be in that life stage where getting up off the floor is the difference between life and death. It really can be.
Absolutely. I think that I like the strength training initially because, people say, I want to be big, I want to be muscular. That's going to take time. we're going to be here for a long time. Because
Mm.
hypertrophy doesn't happen quickly, because there's a lot of things that we've just talked about that need to go into that mix to make that happen. But strength is almost, at the beginning, is almost a vertical line where we can get people going, they come in, they go, right, well, what can you lift off the floor? And they start off and they can lift very little, relatively. But this is the importance of, and you may have seen people in the gym, and you think, oh, they're texting a lot, or why are they carrying around a notebook? Why are they making them notes? Are they writing out a complaint letter?
Mm.
But keeping that data, and I am so data driven, but that data is incredibly important for your journey, because once you start writing down what you're achieving and you see, I'm not noticing any difference in the way I look, but I feel different, and wow, can I move some weight now? You're physically able to do something that I couldn't do 4 weeks ago. And that's how quickly that's going to happen. Whereas hypertrophy, with 4 months, we're
Yeah.
not 4 weeks.
Yeah. And I think as well, if people are wondering what the difference is, it will come in terms of, if you've got a training program, or say you're browsing YouTube because you think, well, I need to start working on strength. So what is this going to look like? As a general rule, heavy weight, lower reps. And I would have anybody training for strength in the 3 to 5 rep range, and no more than that. And the amount of people, particularly when they're starting off, who will say, oh, that doesn't feel like very much. No, that's not what we're aiming for. This is not a HIIT workout. You're not meant to be out of breath. You definitely shouldn't be feeling sore within the session. Sometimes it'll come to the surface a day or two later on.
Yeah.
But if I'm taking somebody who's a complete beginner, they're not doing sets of 10 or 12 with a heavy load. I want you to be feeling about at your limit, 3 to 5 or 6 reps.
Yeah.
And that's about it. And it's perfectly safe. It does also significantly improve stability.
Yeah.
Which is worth mentioning as well. If you're not strong, your chances of being stable when you have to bend over on one leg to pick something up or squeeze into a certain spot. So one of the benefits that people have often said to me quite quickly is how much more stable they feel.
Yes.
Whether it's walking on uneven ground. And it's the same thing. So, if you've only got a short window of time, or you really don't want to be doing this, but you have to, which is true for a lot of people, they're not going to become competitive athletes, they're just doing this to stay healthy, then it works even better. Working in a strength adaptation range is absolutely heavy weights, lower reps, get in, get done, and get on with your day and the rest of your week and your life.
It's interesting you say about stability. What I do with my clients, and luckily I'm lucky enough to work in a private gym, so they're not doing this in public, but I will get them in the gym, I'll get them to take their trainers off, and I'll say, right, what I want you to do is I want you to take your socks off, but I want you to do it standing up. You need to put your socks back on, stand. And actually, it's amazing how many people can't actually simply stand on one leg, bend slightly to put their sock on, pull their sock up, then do that on the other leg. And that's all about that stability and proprioception that is gained by strength training.
And then you get a back tweak, because back tweaks are part of being human and being bipedal. And that brings it all to the forefront, is that, suddenly, hang on, I need to tie my shoelace, or I need to put my sock on. And now you've got a sore back, coupled with this instability that you hadn't noticed was creeping in the back door over the last 5 years, when you were putting off getting started with something because, work was more important, or it was always on the to-do list and you never got round. And that's what we see, that repeating pattern again and again of these things. There's moments, isn't there, I think, not so much when you're your son's age, because you literally feel immortal and you can do all of that and get up for work the next day. But, in the second half of life, it's a bit different. You have moments where you suddenly might feel your age, and what we want to do is push those into the future. And so much of that comes down to strength. And
the thing is, what I think is really important is that you must not let go of that youth. And what we do is we choose to let go of activity around sort of late 20s into the 30s. We could do it in our 20s, and we could do it no problem at all. And then because we don't keep on with it, we just presume it's always there. And it actually, like you say, suddenly one day you go to do something and you can't do it. Well, it didn't just do that. There's been a gradual loss over those years. But because you're not utilizing those muscle groups, because nobody ever says to you, stand up and put your socks on, nobody ever notices they can't stand up and put their socks on and then take their socks off and put their socks back on while standing up, because nobody ever does it, because we live in a world of convenience where we're never asked to do something that as a child we would just do it. Children don't even think about it. My youngest, he doesn't even think about anything, physical. He doesn't contemplate anything. He just gets on and does it.
I know, I'm jealous because you don't appreciate it when you're there. You really don't. And just like I don't appreciate some of the stuff that I'm probably still taking for granted at 46, that probably in 10 years' time,
Yeah.
that will be an issue because, I love training and I believe it's the difference.
Yeah.
It's the difference between the direction that your life goes, but it's probably worth adding, it doesn't make you immortal, even though some people genuinely, I was talking to a friend about this the other day, as some people in their 40s and 50s will then become so extreme with these things and so rigid about it. And we were just saying, is that to offset some of the crap that you did in your 20s and 30s? Quite possibly. It doesn't work like that. It's the dose decides the poison, as I repeatedly say.
Have you seen that guy, Brian Johnson?
Uh,
He's the longevity guy, billionaire, sold his tech company.
I've heard of him. I haven't watched any of his interviews or anything.
Wow, you've got to get onto this. This guy is Brian Johnson sold I can't remember which tech company it was, but he sold it for like billions.
I bet he did.
Then decided he was going to buy immortality. So he has gone on this journey of immortality. And to be honest with you, he looks a little bit odd because he looks a little bit almost plastic now. He's not had plastic surgery, but he takes, 72 capsules in the morning. He does this regime. I mean, I just think, is life fun for you? Because you seem to be consumed by it. But it's interesting to see all the tests that he's having done on him are saying that he is actually going backwards in age. So who knows?
Real life Benjamin Button. But I don't know. I think I've mentioned Peter Attia's book Outlive before. I don't know if you've necessarily read it, but he's also in the longevity space. Very well respected doctor, very knowledgeable. But the final chapter is about his emotional health. And he said his therapist said to him,
I love that.
Well, it's just so normal in America, isn't it? Everybody has a therapist in their back pocket. But she said to him, for somebody who's so obsessed with living longer, you're quite miserable in this life. And I think it was a bit of a slap round the face to him.
Yeah.
And I think that chapter was well positioned at the end, because you do have to come back to, let's do this stuff to live now. And, it's not going to make you immortal, but let's try and reduce the space of disability and disease to the shortest chapter possible, hopefully. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, good. So some ideas for next time, which I'll talk to you about afterwards. But I think the weight loss injections are looming, and they've got to be there, haven't they? They need some discussion. Yeah.
Definitely, we should do it.
Yeah, good. Okay. See you next time.
Okay.